December 1944. U.S. Rangers capture a Nazi stronghold on the German border. But a series of counterattacks and artillery tree bursts leave just a handful of men to defend their critical capture. In their extreme vulnerability, the Rangers must consider an unthinkable plan to ward off the next attack.
It's that desperate. They have to call the artillery strike on their own position and hope to survive.
On June 6, 1944, Allied forces finally land troops in Normandy to open the Western Front. But Nazi fanatics and diehards continue to fight ruthlessly for survival. D-Day was a battle. The Allies still need to win the war. December 7th, 1944, Bergstein, Germany. Members of the American 2nd Ranger Battalion go behind enemy lines to reconnoiter the German stronghold of Hill 400. As second in command, Lieutenant Len Lommel scouts for Dog Company. The Rangers are not here to fight. They creep through the darkness to identify the German bunkers and machine gun nests they will need to capture when they launch their assault on Hill 400 in the morning. After the rapid collapse of Nazi forces in France over the summer, the fight moves towards the German border.
In autumn 1944, the entire situation for the German soldier changes. It's the first time now in this war that he's fighting on home ground. This is something that gives him a new motivation to continue.
Adolf Hitler orders defenses to be strengthened along Germany's borderlands, which run through the Hurtgen forest. The Allies call the 390-mile series of fortifications the Siegfried Line. By December 1944, German forces have bogged down the Allies in the Hurtgen forest for nearly 3 months. And Allied armies have pushed the Western Front up to the German border and to the base of Hill 400.
Hill 400, to some extent, is the key to the Hurtgen forest.
The hill is a natural fortress, rocky, tree-covered, and 45 degrees on its steepest slope. To these natural defenses, German troops have added bunkers and machine gun nests. Holding the hill permits its occupier to observe troop movements for miles around, including the Cologne Plain.
If you get Hill 400, you immediately can put artillery observers atop that hill. At that stage, then you can call down U.S. artillery upon any German movement in the area. Hill 400 emerges as this like solid gold real estate that both sides understand they have to have.
The Rangers now have orders to seize the hill. Lommel's scout is the first step.
He went up Hill 400 and scouted out the different positions and then was able to bring back that crucial intelligence which helped shape the attack on December 7th.
Lommel and the other scouts slip into the town of Bergstein at the base of the hill. Just before 6 a.m., Lommel's men of 2nd Ranger Battalion's Dog Company prepare to jump off.
We got an MG on the left side, and this one on the right.
Most have arrived just in time to move into the line. The men have had little or no sleep.
There's one right near the road. Requesting fire!
At 0600 hours, the Rangers charge from their positions. They must fight their way through Bergstein to their first objective.
As they move from the cellars, they're receiving incoming artillery fire from the Germans, and men are being shredded by these artillery shells. They're also being sniped at.
American forces hold just a sliver of the village. They are surrounded on 3 sides.
And they can easily be cut off by the Germans and annihilated. The Germans wanted it back at all costs.
They only need to advance a few hundred yards, but combat in built-up areas like towns is a challenge. The walls provide shelter to both sides. It is also easy to get disoriented.
Urban combat is some of the most difficult combat that any soldier can encounter. It's not a situation where you're firing at somebody 100 yards away. You're firing at them at point-blank range, and in many cases, it's hand-to-hand.
Men from Fox Company join Dog Company as the American Rangers continue to fight to the edge of town. The battle for Bergstein will rage, even after the attack on the hill begins. The Germans relentless in their attempts to drive out U.S. forces, and the Americans equally determined to hang on. Lommel and the 2 companies finally close in on their first objective.
They converge in front of the hill, in front of the field, and in what's been described as a sunken road, where there's a little bit of cover from the defenders on top of Hill 400, as well as the machine guns that are arrayed at the base of the hill.
Lommel has fought with many of these men for a long time. 6 months earlier, on D-Day, Lommel, along with Staff Sergeant Jack Kuhn, destroyed 5 of the Germans' main artillery guns at Utah and Omaha beaches.
Len was shot in the side as he was scaling the cliff, but despite this wound, this gaping wound, kept climbing and completed the mission. He fought through the maze of fortifications on the top and found the guns on top of Point Hawk and disabled them with thermite grenades.
This action had a profound impact on D-Day, saving countless lives. Lommel would earn citations from the American, British, and French governments. Lommel now eyes their next objective. The U.S. 2nd Ranger Battalion must take Hill 400 and hold it for 24 hours until relieved. By 0700, 120 men from Dog and Fox companies have made it to the base of the hill. Between them and the tree line is a field 100 yards wide. The Rangers know once they begin, they cannot stop.
Across an open field under machine gun fire from MG-42s, what was called Hitler's bone saw, because it rattled off over 1,200 rounds per minute. The entire field itself was mined with bouncing Betty mines. And these are mines that would shoot up into the air and then detonate around the area of your groin and sever legs and body parts. The odds were definitely stacked against the Rangers on December 7th.
German artillery and mortars begin targeting the Rangers' position. The first shells fall 75 yards behind the Americans. The German gunners fine-tune. The shells start to drop closer. Meanwhile, U.S. artillery responds and shells German positions in the tree line.
Basically what's known as a rolling barrage or a creeping barrage. This is American artillery that is creeping in front of the Rangers.
as the German shells drop closer to Dog and Fox companies from behind. The Rangers are pinned between the two artillery barrages. Among the artillery weapons aimed at the Rangers is the Nebelwerfer 41. The German rocket launcher fires 5.9-inch shells. Each salvo fires 6 rockets 1 second apart. Concussive force alone can kill, even if the high explosive fragments miss. As the rockets close in on the American Rangers, an unexpected order is given.
Because these are very battle-hardened troops, but somehow in the mix of this there was an unseasoned, untrained officer that ordered a scout to go out and reconnoiter the field.
Fox Company's Sergeant Herman Stein is one of several Ranger NCOs to question the order given to one of the enlisted men.
And they universally said, "Don't go out there. Don't go." They said it several times, and they tried to stop the man from going.
Stein and the others knew the order meant certain death for whoever went. Can the weight of their experience force the officer to back down? December 1944. The American 2nd Ranger Battalion prepares to attack a key position. They must take Hill 400, which overlooks the town of Bergstein, just inside the German border. As they wait to jump off, a newly assigned officer orders a man to scout the field out front. The non-commissioned officers argue it is too dangerous.
The officer then looked at the man and said, "This is a direct order, go out into the field." And he actually did. And as he went into the field, he was shot in the gut.
What might have triggered a court-martial in another unit is a hallmark of the 2nd Ranger psyche.
In 1942, the United States didn't have special operation forces or commandos. The Rangers were a new thing. They were all volunteers, and they had a very tough weed-out process. These men had to march and climb and shoot and fight. Very few people were able to make it through the actual training.
It molded men who could think outside the box, question orders, and take initiative if they thought it was in the best interest of the mission. That mindset would prompt Fox Company Sergeant William McHugh to action. McHugh realizes that the German mortars are closing in and would strike them before their jump-off time.
Sergeant McHugh shouts, "Let's get the bastards." And then he raises his Tommy gun over his head, and they charge across the field. And it's been described as like a tsunami. A band of screaming, shooting Rangers descending on these German machine gun nests, crossing this open field.
McHugh spurs Dog and Fox Company to charge straight towards the German guns. Because they jumped off early, some of the incoming artillery they dodge is American.
There's a real danger of being hit by their own friendly fire from this artillery. But the fact that they leave only a few minutes early saves many of their lives. Men were being hit by the artillery, by the German bullets, and then even by mines as they were crossing the field. But they didn't have a chance to look back or even help anybody. They were just moving forward.
Standing in the Rangers' way is a regiment of the 272nd Volksgrenadier Division, commanded by Captain Adolf Thomé. The Volksgrenadier Divisions are formed after the assassination attempt on Adolf Hitler by senior officers in July 1944.
The idea behind the Volksgrenadier divisions, you can already see this in the name Volks, which means people, kind of grassroots formation, inspired with Nazi ideology, with a belief of one community serving for a common cause.
As Germany grapples with manpower shortages, older men and teenage boys are conscripted from civilian life to form a replacement army loyal to Hitler. Members of the Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine report for combat service. Injured soldiers also return to the lines faster. Heinrich Himmler mobilizes 49 new Volksgrenadier divisions in about 8 weeks. Himmler ensures that they are well armed, but hurries them into battle. While overall results have been mixed, the 272nd has fought well in the Hurtgen Forest. At Thomé's disposal are 36 pieces of direct artillery support. Just that morning, his troops had planned to retake Bergstein.
But the US Rangers were the first ones to attack, and this puts Thomé very quickly into a defensive position.
The Rangers' premature attack gives them a slight advantage over the Volksgrenadier.
The artillery is actually coming in right as they're crossing, and it keeps the Germans' machine gunners' heads down.
The Rangers who make it across the field capture the German outer positions.
The Germans that are overrun are either bayoneted in many cases, or they're fleeing for their lives up the top of Hill 400.
The US Rangers press on. Speed and surprise add to their arsenal. Both Allied and German artillery continue to fall on the base of the hill. The Rangers have no choice but to continue to the next line of German defenses. Fighting is heavy as 2 companies of the American 2nd Ranger Battalion charge up Hill 400, a stronghold on Germany's border. Rangers try to clear German bunkers and machine gun nests as they move uphill.
This is close quarters combat. This is personal. In some cases, it's directly hand-to-hand fighting with bayonets and knives, pistols. That's the level of intensity that these men had to go through just to get up that hill.
Lieutenant Len Lamel, second in command of Dog Company, is amongst the first Rangers to reach the summit. Others quickly catch up. Their ascent has taken less than an hour. Members of Fox Company use grenades and gunfire to force the surrender of the German hilltop bunker. By 0830, the Rangers have claimed Hill 400. To that point in the war, it is one of the deepest incursions into Germany by US or other Western allies.
These men were all running on adrenaline. Their nerves were taut from the charge itself, the artillery that was falling, the close-in combat. They get to the top of the hill, that was an exhilarating feeling. That's what they told me.
The capture of Hill 400 is a remarkable achievement.
But it was just the beginning.
Lieutenant Lamel orders the Rangers to dig in. On the exposed hillside, security is elusive.
The only real refuge that they had was the command bunker, an observation bunker on the top of Hill 400.
Some Rangers take shelter in positions captured from the Germans, but that is not always possible.
The German foxholes were facing the American lines. They weren't facing the sides or flanks of the hill where the Germans were going to be coming from.
New foxholes proved difficult to dig in the rocky soil.
The ground is frozen solid. They're barely able to claw through it.
And some of the men actually use their fingernails, they're bloody, as they claw through the dirt the best they can to dig this shallow hole with their trench knives and their bayonets. Anything that they can to just get a little semblance of cover.
Foxholes are a critical perimeter defense against the inevitable German counterattack.
German doctrine very much cherishes the idea of offensive action. So even if you lose a position, you are supposed to counterattack as quickly as possible.
German High Command considers Hill 400 to be of vital importance for a top-secret reason. 17 German divisions, totaling over 200,000 men, amassed in the nearby Ardennes forest. Hitler has been planning a surprise offensive in a bid to turn the tide of war. Their leaders go to great effort to conceal the buildup from Allied reconnaissance.
And if the Americans sit on Hill 400, they can spot German assembly areas in the rear.
Captain Adolf Thomé receives a battalion of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, an elite group of paratroopers as reinforcements. General Feldmarschall Walter Model offers Thomé's men an added incentive.
Field Marshal Model promises the German unit re-seizing Hill 400, an Iron Cross for each individual soldier, and a 7-day leave.
Having pre-ranged all of the positions on the hill with his guns, Thomé begins to shell the Rangers.
When the Germans attack Hill 400, the infantry attacks along the slopes towards the hill, and the German artillery is putting fire onto the US soldiers sitting on top of the mountain. So there is a danger that German shells will also kill German infantrymen.
The artillery proves persistent.
This is every minute. This is every hour. It's coming in. And there's no place to run or hide, and it's random death from above.
Along with standard artillery rounds, part of Thomé's strategy is to create tree bursts.
The Hürtgen forest had conifer trees that were over 100 feet high in some places. And the Germans designed their artillery barrages to strike above the canopy so that not only would deadly shrapnel rain down on the Americans, but also splinters that were razor sharp that could slice through the body.
Standard Allied training was to drop to the ground in the face of incoming artillery. During a tree burst, such a move would prove fatal. Soldiers had to overcome their instincts and stay upright to let their helmets protect them.
If there was a tree nearby, they'd actually hug the tree because it would prevent the shrapnel and splinters from the wood wouldn't be able to hit them.
As the Germans start to counterattack, Lieutenant Len Lomel and his fellow Rangers are dangerously exposed. Captain Adolf Thomé rallies more than 100 German troops against the American 2nd Ranger Battalion who have just captured Hill 400. The German Volksgrenadier and the Fallschirmjäger attack in small groups. The result is brutal, close-in fighting. The Volksgrenadiers possess an extremely effective weapon for this kind of battle. The MP-44, the world's first assault rifle. Equipped with a 30-round magazine, the gun can switch from single shot to rapid fire with a flick of a lever. The MP-44 has an effective range of 164 yards in the full automatic position and 437 yards in single shot mode. Armed with both MP-44s and its precursor, the MP-40, some German forces approach a location defended by Dog Company Sergeant Ed Secor.
When the Germans counterattack, they are not running into open fire. They're trying to infiltrate the enemy positions and try to circumvent the strong points.
Secor and a private had secured good coverage.
Sergeant Secor was positioned under an overhanging boulder in a shallow foxhole.
But a German bullet renders Secor's weapon inoperable. In response, the usually mild-mannered Secor charges out to recover guns from dead German soldiers nearby.
He immediately grabbed two MP40 machine pistols and then, with both hands, fired into the mass of oncoming Germans.
When they are empty, he then pulls out his pistol and continues to fire. Sergeant Secor's daring actions thwart the German counterattack. Captain Tomei and his men retreat to regroup and try again. During the German attack, Lieutenant Len Lomel's hand is injured by shrapnel. Despite his own wound, he must devise a defensive strategy for the Rangers, now down to about 40 able-bodied men. He has Herm Stein from Fox Company bring his men closer to Dog Company. He also needs more information.
Len Lomel really understood reconnaissance, so he sent out two-man scouts to sort of probe portions of the hill to find out where the enemy was.
So many of the Ranger radios have been damaged. Communication is difficult.
It was hand signals, or a runner would run up to a position and say what's going on.
In response, Lomel then has the Rangers concentrate in front of the German buildup, so they can meet the attack with full force. When Captain Tomei leads his troops back up the hill, Lomel, Stein, and their fellow Rangers are ready for them. The Germans, however, do not attack on a single front. They probe the Ranger line for weaknesses. Lomel counters by constantly shifting his men.
And this is a situation of very scarce resources. This is the resource being the GI, or a Ranger. So they had to be very smart in how they defended the hill. And that's what they did. They moved his men around according to the threat.
Lomel's mobile tactics lead the Germans to believe that the Rangers occupy the hill in great numbers. Had the Germans realized, they could have easily overwhelmed the American forces. But as the Rangers repel the second German counterattack, they suffer further casualties. Just after 1600 hours, Lomel sends a message to his superiors in Bergstein that he is down to 25 men who remain surrounded by German troops.
It is like King of the Castle. They're holding a perimeter on the top of the hill.
The Rangers bring the wounded they can reach to the observation bunker at the crest of Hill 400.
And that becomes the field hospital. And they don't have any real medical equipment or anything like that. They just have some bandages. If they're lucky, they might even have a morphine syringe, but that's scarce too. There's very little in terms of medical supplies.
But many others lay out of reach and remain exposed to incoming shrapnel. In daylight, there was no way for the Rangers to evacuate their casualties.
If they had to bring a wounded man down, they had to fight their way down the hill.
The injured and dying Rangers call out. Finally, Lommel can't take their cries any longer.
Len felt completely helpless on that front. And then he felt helpless by the men that were dying in the bunker. And there was a real question whether or not they were going to be able to hold out. I mean, the whole hill was about to be overrun at any moment.
Gather around.
Lommel proposes the unthinkable, that the Rangers abandon Hill 400. After a series of German counterattacks to retake Hill 400, Lieutenant Len Lommel proposes a shocking plan to the remaining members of the two U.S. Ranger companies. Desperate to help his injured men, he suggests handing Hill 400 back to the Germans.
There was a real question whether or not they had enough men to hold that hill because of the constant artillery and the counterattacks. And it was at this point that he was, proposing a solution to save his men.
Lommel explains, based on his experience, the Germans would care for the American wounded if they surrendered the hill.
His willingness to do so was an insight into how bad the battle was becoming and how slim a chance some of these guys had of surviving their wounds. It's an indicator into what kind of crisis you're dealing with at Hill 400.
Lommel believes it will be the fastest way to get Ranger casualties treatment and save the lives of the dying. In World War II, American and German soldiers generally treat each other's wounded and prisoners according to the Geneva Convention. German soldiers captured by American and Western allies had a death rate of less than 1%, while 4% of US soldiers died in German captivity. Relatively low numbers by wartime standards. But
that would only be the case after the intensity of combat had ebbed.
If the hill fell in heavy combat, the wounded would likely be overrun as well.
Lommel was at an inflection point in the battle, the men or the mission. And he floated the idea, do we move off the hill and leave the wounded so that the German medics can tend to them?
Well, what do you think?
The Ranger response is unanimous. It's a no. No, absolutely not no.
They are outnumbered and the wounded vulnerable, but to abandon the hill would mean their sacrifices have been in vain.
We're all right. Stay.
At 1652, Lommel sends an urgent call to his superiors in Bergstein, the town below the hill, for reinforcements. Another German counterattack tries to break the remaining Rangers. The Americans hold them off in hand-to-hand fighting with fixed bayonets.
The forest is so black, you're not able to see somebody unless they're right on top of you. And it's close in and intimate because you are face to face with the enemy.
A platoon of reinforcements from the 2nd Rangers Easy Company finally arrives from the village below and help Dog and Fox companies fight off the next German counterattack. Lommel sustains another injury, this time in his upper thigh, and is now one of the many Ranger casualties who needs medical care. They hope that some can be evacuated under the cover of dark. Rangers from Charlie and Dog Company's mortar battalion climbed the hill with litters for the wounded. The stretcher bearers work silently. German troops continue to occupy the slopes.
And just picture the dead weight of a wounded man on a stretcher, and you've got to somehow haul this person down. It's a broken hill with tree roots all over the place, and it's so easy to trip or get caught by the enemy. It's extremely perilous.
Though wounded, Lamel oversees the evacuation of the Ranger casualties. At 21:40 hours, he is amongst the last of the injured to leave Hill 400.
Lamel was losing a lot of blood. His finger was dangling from his tendon. He did not want to leave his men, but his wounds basically forced him off the hill.
Sergeant Hermstein is now in charge of Fox Company. The night is broken by periodic shells and sniper fire. If the few dozen Rangers survive until morning, they know that another German counterattack will surely come. The 2nd Ranger Battalion has kept Hill 400 out of German hands for much of December 7th, 1944. And by 1700 hours on December 8th, they've withstood 2 more counterattacks, coming from 3 sides of the hill.
Hill 400, you can't think of it as, oh, here's the Americans controlling the whole hill. It's more like, here's a handful of guys in little clumps here and there on that hill who control the ground they stand on, kind of, controlling the entry points, the exit points, controlling an area 30 yards away. That's problematic.
Another heavy artillery bombardment begins, a sign that the next counterattack is imminent. Sergeant Hermstein of Fox Company endures the bombardment with an assortment of weapons at the ready. The Rangers who remain on the hill keep the weapons of the killed and wounded and collect those abandoned by the Germans to prevent running out of ammunition. It's risky.
There's a real danger with using captured German weapons because they make a distinct sound. And if you're an American combatant hearing a German weapon, you could potentially think it's a German firing that weapon and fire upon your own men.
As the artillery eases, 150 German troops under the command of Captain Adolf Thomé charge the hill. The 5th counterattack is the strongest yet. German troops advance to within 30 yards of the observation bunker on the top of the hill. The Ranger numbers continue to dwindle. They resort to desperate measures to hold their position. They call in artillery support, virtually onto the hilltop.
It's that desperate. They have to call the artillery strike on their own position and hope to survive.
It's a system the Rangers have a lot of confidence in.
By December 1944, U.S. artillery is among the best in the world. Very sophisticated forward observation, communications equipment, accuracy. It certainly is better and available in more quantity than German artillery.
American artillery rings the Rangers' positions. While dangerous for the Rangers, it achieves the desired objective. Many Germans are killed. Those that are not are forced to retreat. But the battle still exacts its toll from the Rangers. Even with the reinforcements from Easy Company, the Rangers are now down to 22 able-bodied men.
Lieutenant Kennard went directly to the commanding officer at Corps to beg for reinforcements. It's way past 24 hours. Corps comes back and says, you must hold that hill at all costs. And he goes back and reports back that the reinforcements weren't going to arrive.
Even worse, they start to run critically low on ammunition. As a second night falls, the remaining Rangers dig in again.
What happens with most people is that you don't think about death or life. You just think you're going to die anyways, so it doesn't matter. And I think that's what a lot of those Rangers felt.
Then out of the darkness, a relief force finally arrives. A battalion from the U.S. 13th Infantry, 8th Division, ascends. Originally tasked to hold Hill 400 for 24 hours, the Rangers have survived 40.
It was all about the collective sacrifice that they had made and all the men that had died prior to that point in time, that they said, no, absolutely not. We will not give an inch. We will hold this hill.
At 22:30 hours, Sergeant Herm Stein is one of the last Rangers to walk off Hill 400. In taking and holding the position, the 2nd Rangers suffer 23 men killed and 106 wounded. 4 are missing in action. 450 German troops are killed and 64 taken prisoner. German Captain Adolf Thomé would receive the Knight's Cross for his defense of Bergstein and repeated attempts to reclaim the hill. Herm Stein from Rangers Fox Company is later awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism on December 7th and serves out the rest of the war. Len Lomel also survives the war and was presented with the Silver Star for his heroic leadership on Hill 400.
I think in some ways it represents like the gold standard of who we are as Americans. These are individuals that are willing to sacrifice their lives for something larger than themselves. It's pretty extraordinary.
While Hill 400 is one of the deepest penetrations into Germany by American or British forces to that point in the war, the Allies failed to capitalize. Depleted troops cannot advance further and do not discover the massive German buildup in the Ardennes forest.
Maybe the best term is that they are now combat ineffective. When you suffer 33,000 casualties in the space of 5 weeks or so, and almost all of them concentrated in the rifle companies among the forward-leaning combat troops, this is definitely going to have an effect. So in most of those companies, you are talking about anything from about a 50 to 100% casualty rate, and especially among the officers.
The Germans are able to slow down significantly the Allied advance in the Hürtgen forest. However, at the same time, the Germans also suffer drastically in these battles, and these are casualties the Germans actually cannot afford.
Only 8 days later, on December 16, 1944, Germany launches its last major offensive of the war, which would come to be known by the Allies as the Battle of the Bulge.
The Germans want to drive a wedge between the Allies, between the Americans and the British.
Hitler's army would take them completely by surprise and effectively end the fighting in the Hürtgen forest. The Battle of the Bulge would prove to be one of the largest and bloodiest battles fought by the U.S. during World War II. The setbacks suffered mean the war in Europe will last another 6 months.